November 12, 1943. The air in the cramped office of the Bendler block hung heavy with the scent of stale tobacco and damp wool, a fitting shroud for the unraveling secrets of an empire on the brink. At 76 Tirpitzufer, deep within the nerve center of German army intelligence operations, two of the Wehrmacht's sharpest minds prepared to confront a revelation that would dismantle every pillar of belief upholding the High Command's illusions. Colonel Reinhard Gehlen, chief of Foreign Armies East, leaned forward in his wooden chair, his fingers steepled as if in prayer against the inevitable. Across the scarred oak desk sat his counterpart, Colonel Alexis von Roani, head of Foreign Armies West. Both men had ascended through the ranks not by bombast or blind loyalty, but by the quiet alchemy of intellect, decades spent dissecting enemy movements with the precision of surgeons wielding scalpels. They had mapped the shifting tides of the Eastern Front's brutal calculus and the deceptive calm of the Western theater. Yet now, before them sprawled a modest stack of papers, innocuous as ration slips that harbored a toxin more lethal than any gas canister unearthed from the Marne. These were no encrypted missives or pilfered blueprints. They were the prosaic heartbeat of American military logistics, reports seized from the mud of recent skirmishes in Italy. Columns of figures chronicled the ebb and flow of crates unloaded at docks, barrels rolled into depots, shells tallied in ammunition trains. Bureaucratic tedium incarnate, stamped and initialed by faceless quartermasters of the U.S. Fifth Army. Nothing in their faded ink whispered of apocalypse. But the arithmetic they encoded painted a portrait of industrial dominion so vast that Gehlen and von Roene had devoted the prior week to a frantic audit, cross-checks against captured ledgers, POW testimonies, aerial grainy photographs smuggled from neutral ports. Each verification deepened the chasm, confirming not a mistake, but a merciless truth. Germany was not merely outgunned, it was outbuilt, outsupplied, outendured on a scale that rendered victory a fever dream. Von Roen's hand, steady in counsel but betraying a faint tremor now, slid the uppermost form toward Gehlen. It was a requisition sheet for a single American corps in the Italian theater, 1 month's worth of projected deliveries, authenticated by layers of signatures and seals. Gehlen's eyes traced the lines, his breath shallow as the implications coalesced. This lone corps, some 80,000 souls grinding through the Apennines, was slated for more ammunition in 30 days than the entire Wehrmacht drew for the Eastern Front's meat grinder. He lifted his gaze to von Roene, seeking in his colleague's lined face some flicker of reprieve, a clerical oversight, a forged flourish. But von Roene's eyes, shadowed by nights without sleep, offered only the grim solidarity of shared damnation. He had clawed through these sums himself, recalculating under lamplight until dawn, bargaining with fate for a decimal misplaced. "This cannot stand," Gehlen murmured, his voice a threadbare whisper, more plea than proclamation. It was the utterance of a man who had long trusted evidence over hope, now adrift in its undertow. Undeterred, von Roene drew forth another sheet, its edges frayed from hasty capture. "I echoed that doubt," he replied, his tone measured as if reciting a eulogy. "Consider this. Fuel manifests for the same corps' 1 lunar cycle's bounty. 3.2 million gallons of gasoline, 800,000 of diesel." He let the digits linger, heavy as unspent rounds. "Army Group Center, 3 armies, 500,000 men clawing at the steppe, scrapes by on less than a full month." The words landed like distant thunder, presaging the storm. Their week had been a ritual of such juxtapositions. American manifests weighed against Wehrmacht allotments, POW mutterings sifted alongside agent dispatches from Lisbon and Stockholm, reconnaissance negatives developed in basements thick with developer fumes, aerial counts of convoy serpents snaking from Sicilian ports, serial numbers etched on captured jeeps, traced back to Detroit's assembly halls. Every thread, pulled from disparate looms, wove the same tapestry. America was not outproducing Germany. It was eclipsing it, forging munitions at a rhythm that made the Reich's foundries seem like village smithies hammering horseshoes. This epiphany, forged in the dim glow of that Berlin chamber, traced its lineage not to a single raid, but to a cascade of errors spanning years, a foundational folly in the edifice of Nazi grand strategy. The German intelligence apparatus had shadowed Allied industry since the Anschluss, dossiers bulging with blueprints of Ford plants and inventories of Bethlehem Steel's ingots. Yet from Munich to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Berlin's seers had woefully misgauged the Yankee colossus. This blindness was no mere oversight of spy masters. It was woven into the warp of Nazi Weltanschauung, a racial hubris that deemed Anglo-Saxon ingenuity a myth and Germany's own forge the pinnacle of Teutonic mastery. The Reich's wartime ledger, etched in the sweat of total mobilization, tinted every projection. By 1943, Hitler's empire had wrung dry its veins, occupied lands stripped of ore and oil, slave columns shuffling through Ruhr shadows, factories pulsing 24 hours under Speer's iron gaze. Output had surged, Panzer IVs rolling off lines at rates that would have staggered Ludendorff, yet the ledger bled red. Conquests from Paris to Kiev yielded plunder, but the material tide turned inexorably against the swastika. Arithmetic, that impartial arbiter, doled out defeat in increments too vast for bayonets to parry. The seed of delusion sprouted in the spring of 1940 amid the Blitzkrieg's afterglow. On May 16th, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt addressed a hushed Congress, his voice crackling over transatlantic wires to Berlin's listening posts. America, he vowed, would birth 50,000 warplanes in a year, a rearmament thunderclap. Weeks later, the arsenal swelled, 185,000 aircraft, 120,000 tanks, 55,000 anti-aircraft batteries, 18 million tons of hulls plowing the seas within 24 months. These edicts ricocheted through Abwehr channels, landing on OKW desks like taunts from a rival duelist. Hitler's inner sanctum, Göring with his Luftwaffe laurels, radar charting U-boat wolf packs, brushed them aside as bluster, Roosevelt's bombast to stiffen British spines. The rationale seemed ironclad. In 1939, U.S. skies hummed with fewer than 3,000 military birds annually. Its army, a constabulary dwarfed by Portugal's, mustered obsolete M3 Lee tanks in pitiful squads. The Atlantic Fleet straddled oceans like a somnambulant giant geared for Manila patrols, not panzer thrusts. A 60-fold leap in output? It defied the catechism of mobilization. Factories gestated in years, welders forged in months, assembly kinks ironed over trials that bled treasure. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring, that corpulent oracle of the skies, encapsulated the scoff in a quip historians would etch in amber. The Americans make fine refrigerators and razor blades, but they'll never forge the thunder to fell the Reich. The anecdote, gleaned from post-war transcripts rather than wartime memos, captured the zeitgeist unerringly. Berlin's elite harbored a visceral disdain for Yankee prowess, viewing it as the frippery of consumer bazaars. Chevrolets for the masses, not Messerschmitts for the master race. Military sinews demanded martial discipline, hierarchical forges honed since the Kaiser's drill yards. How could Detroit's slick suits rival Krupp's anvil chorus? This calculus, steeped in Aryan exceptionalism, overlooked a seismic undercurrent. The Great Depression's ghost lingered in America's hollowed mills. Idle behemoths, Pittsburgh forges cold, auto plants echoing with silence, harbored latent fury. 25% unemployment idled legions of riveters and draftsmen. Machine tools, tooled for Model T frames, slumbered in rust. Roosevelt's clarion did not conjure ex nihilo. It redirected a slumbering Leviathan, reconverting assembly bays from Buicks to B-17s, rehiring the breadline hordes for hazard pay. Germany, by cruel contrast, entered the fray at full throttle. Rearmament had gnawed at the economy since 1933, deficits masked by MEFO bills, factories humming at 90% before Poland's fall. No depression buffer awaited mobilization. Expansion meant conquest or conjuration, new plants clawed from Rhineland clay or serried ranks of the unfree bent to belts. Each avenue snared in delays. French steel mills sabotaged in retreat. Czech Skodas yoked but yielding grudgingly. The Reich's sprint yielded marvels. Stukas diving on Dunkirk, but the well ran shallow. America's reservoir, vast and untapped, allowed a surge that Berlin's prophets, blinded by their own exhaust, could scarce envision. Von Roen, scion of Prussian nobility whose ancestors had charged at Waterloo, bore the mandate for Western scrutiny. His Fremde Heer West trawled a net of sources. Luftwaffe obliques over Norfolk yards, Enigma intercepts garbled by static, assets in Madrid whispering of Lend-Lease manifests. From Pearl Harbor's embers through 1942's ramp-up, the deluge was a fog of contradictions. One dispatch. Contradictions. One dispatch. Hailed Ford's Willow Run berthing B-24s hourly. Another decried strikes crippling arsenals, shoddy welds dooming hulls. The High Command, basking in Barbarossa's blaze, cherry-picked the balm. Tales of Yankee dithering. Congress squabbling over budgets. Confirmation bias, that sly saboteur, afflicted all general staffs, but in Berlin it festered lethal. Victories cascaded. Warsaw in weeks, Paris in a month, Athens in days, while the Kriegsmarine's wolves gnawed Atlantic convoys. Why dread a republic unbloodied since Belleau Wood, its doughboys green, its Panzer's museum curios? Yet Fischer's spiderwebbed in November 1942, with torches' flares on Morocco's shores. Kesselring's aides anticipated greenhorns ripe for the mauling, fodder for Afrika Korps scimitars. Instead, they met a deluge. Yanks stumbling at Kasserine in February 43, yes, 50 miles yielded, 1,000 felled gear glutting Tunisian sands. But Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox himself, penned dispatches laced with unease. American divisions hemorrhaged materiel yet regenerated overnight, trucks materializing from ether, shells arcing in barrages that dwarfed El Alameин's crescendo. Captured dumps brimmed with largesse, rations for regiments discarded for palatability, jeeps torched for a bent axle when a fresh Ford idled nearby. Rommel tallied. Each U.S. infantry division motored with more wheels than a Wehrmacht corps. Logistics trains outhauled Panzer spearheads. Tactics perish before such prodigality, he wired Berlin, pleading evacuation from the vice of Allied seas and skies. His pleas, archived in OKW vaults, drew yawns. Rommel the pessimist, ever cadging fuel, magnifying foes to mask his flanks. The analysts, however, could not unsee. Tunisia's capitulation in May 43 yielded a harvest of 125,000 Axis captives, their tails harvested in sun-baked camps. Questionnaires probed not just foxholes but the marrow. How fed were the Amis? With what abandon did they expend? The chorus swelled uniform, enlisted privates to staff majors, paratroopers to cannoneers, chanting of bounty bordering blasphemy. Meals pitched for whimsy, sulfas stocked like aspirin, POW slop surpassing frontline gruel. Initial skepticism branded it braggadocio, the loser's litany. But crosshatched with Sicilian scraps and Salerno landings, the pattern etched indelible. Wherever the eagle clashed with the swastika, supply horns overflowed. These whispers, though poignant, paled beside the ledger's ledger, the clinical prose of manifests that brooked no bard's flourish. In autumn's chill, as allies clawed Monte Cassino's flanks, a corps report winged to Tirpitzufer. 80,000 men, mirroring a German counterpart in scale, yet devouring fuel as if parched, 3.2 million gallons petrol, 800,000 diesel. Gielan juxtaposed it against Center Group's dole, Scantier for hordes thrice the host. Ammunition tonnage? 15,000 shells for the Yanks. 2,000 the German norm, deemed lavish. Sevenfold the barrage, sustainable as breath, not for Stalingrad's spasm, but quotidian grind. Replacements? 847 trucks, 43 Shermans, 68 howitzers, not accretions, but parity's toll for wear and tear. The Reich's monthly Panzer birth pangs yielded fewer than this routine mend. Von Roene, that paragon of method, dissected with the dispassion of a Leibniz tallying infinitesimals. Aristocrat by blood, analyst by craft, he summoned silos, Swiss ledgers of ore flows, Swedish tallies of turbine exports, serials from jeeps rusting in Tunis, open-source gleanings from Chicago tribunes, hawked in Istanbul bazaars, corroborated the cascade. Tanks unveiled the rift starkly, 1941's American quiver, 4,021 M3s, meager as Berlin crowed. Yet 42 leaped to 24,000 odd, 43 to 37,198, a sextuple bound. Germany, spears lash cracking, birthed 11,600 in peak, lauded as triumph. 3 Shermans per Panther. The ratio yawned. Aircraft skewered deeper. Reich's 1942, 15,596, Luftwaffe's boast. America's 47,136, thrice the thunder. 43 U.S., 85,898, German 25,000, strained. By 44, 96,000 to 40,000, quadrupled skies, factories outpacing aces tolls. Merchant Leviathans sealed the noose, U-boat 42 Zenith, 6.3 million tons to Davy Jones. Yet Allied tonnage climbed, Liberty ships, those modular miracles, launched at 3 daily. Welded behemoths, prefabricated like Fords, birthed in weeks. SS Robert E. Peary, 4 days, 15 hours. Propaganda? Nay, verified by welders' oaths and hull numbers etched eternal, Galen. Eastern gaze fixed on red hordes, pivoted to Yankee roots. 41% global forge. Reich's 12% even glutted on Europe's corpse. Steel, 81 million U.S. tons to 30 million. Artillery, 43,000 to 11,000. Trucks, 620,000 to 100,000. Horses still hauling Wehrmacht guns. Petroleum, 1.4 billion barrels American, Reich's synthetic trickle a mockery. The asymmetry? Structural. Depression's idols reconverted, decentralized hives resilient to bombs. Chrysler Arsenal, 10,000 souls, 800 Shermans monthly, one plant rivaling the Reich's Panzer Reich. Weeks blurred in Ledger's thrall, analysts conscripting peers for fresh eyes. Consensus congealed. Allies' edge, 3.1, and widening, scripted attrition script. Projections for 44, 3.1 Panzers, 5.1 wings. Tactics, ephemeral against quanta. The December dossier, von Rohen's magnum opus, tabulated the toll. Categories from shells to spars, each a requiem. Attrition's math inexorable. Allies replenished in fortnights, Reich in years. Manpower finite, skies closing, the end arithmetic's decree. Von Rohen bore it upward, honor-bound, no defeatist, but duty's dray. Prussian rectitude armored him. He anticipated ire, not interment. Hitler, orb-weary, branded it treason's ink. Willpower's whetstone, tiger's teeth, V2's vindication. Hannibal scaled Alps. We shall eclipse. Göring guffawed at inferior rivets. The vault swallowed it, unread. Thus, the tragedy, truth tabulated but unheeded. Factories, not fields, scripted the fall. And in that denial, millions marched to margins unforeseen. The rejection of the December dossier reverberated through the corridors of the Bendler block like a muffled detonation, its shockwave dissipating into the ether of willful oblivion. Von Rohen, retreating to his alcove amid stacks of intercepted cables and dog-eared maps, felt the weight not as personal affront, but as the first tremor of structural collapse. He had anticipated the Führer's thunder. Adolf Hitler, that coiled spring of unyielding conviction, had long since transmuted intelligence into inconvenience. "Numbers are the crutch of the weak," the Supreme Commander had snarled in a tirade, relayed by adjutants, his fist pounding the Wolf's Lair's oaken slab. "We have the Volksfire, the Wunderwaffen's edge, Panthers that rend Shermans like tin, Me-262s that will sweep the Untermenschen from the firmament." Göring, ever the peacock in eclipse, had chimed in with tales of Luftwaffe resurgence, dismissing American birds as flying refrigerators laden with scrap. The report, that meticulously forged blade of data, was sheathed in a vault. Its projections, 3-1 armor tallies by spring, up one wings by autumn, gathering dust beside blueprints for vengeance weapons that promised salvation but delivered only echoes. Yet the analysts pressed on, their vocation a stubborn flame against the gathering gloom. Galen, his focus fractured between Volga vastness and Atlantic whispers, orchestrated a quiet insurgency of verification. Microfilms dispatched to safe houses in the Bavarian redoubts. Agents in Bern tasked with pilfering U.S. War Production Board leaks via diplomatic pouches. The influx confirmed the inexorable. Allied forges, stoked by Roosevelt's edict, churned at rhythms defying Teutonic tempo. By early 1944, as winter's rime yielded to mud-churned Ostfront, the ledgers swelled with fresh indictments. A captured Chrysler manual, salvaged from a ditched half-track near Anzio, unveiled the heresy of assembly line armor. Detroit's arsenal of democracy birthing 800 M4s monthly from a single haul. Workers in overalls wielding torque wrenches like sorcerers' wands. Hulls ferried on overhead chains, turrets spun from prefabbed steel blooms, engines slotted sans artisans' caress. One forge equaled the Reich's Panzer sprawl. Krupp, Mayenne, Daimler-Benz lashed to Speer's wheel, yielding 600 iron steeds amid blackout drills and slave shift cruelties. This was no aberration. It was archetype. America's arsenal sprawled decentralized. A hydra of 11 Sherman lines, from Ford's River Rouge to Baldwin's locomotive lofts, each impervious to a single Dornier's kiss. Bomb one bay, 10 persisted, output a metronome unbroken. Germany's centralized crucibles, clustered in the Ruhr's cradle, quailed under RAF hammers. A raid on Schweinfurt's ball-bearing veins could hobble divisions for weeks. The manual's appendices, pored over by Lantern in Galen's sanctum, extolled interchangeable sacraments, parts machined to tolerances forgiving of haste, jigs ensuring union without the fitter's file. Quality? Sacrificed on volume's altar. Shermans brewed thinner than a panther's plate, guns shy of the KWK-42's bite. But 15-1? Even a tiger's toll, felling 5 in a turret duel, crumbled before the horde's replenishment. Craftsmanship avails naught against the avalanche, Galen confided to von Roena over ersatz coffee. The steam curling like specters of Sedan, artillery echoed the dirge. 43,000 Allied tubes in 43. Reich's 11,000 a whisper. Yet America lavished thousands more via Lend-Lease. Stalin's howitzers gorging on Uncle Sam's largesse. Captured Anzio dumps brimmed with 105mm casings, enough to pulverize Cassino's Abbey thrice over. Infantry, no longer footsloggers. Each U.S. division motored with 2,000 trucks organic, eclipsing a Wehrmacht Panzer Corps' haul. Horses, 300,000 still, plowed eastern snows, fodder rationed while jeeps purred on surplus octane. Trucks alone indicted 620,000 American 43 berths, near all for Mars. Germany's 100,000 split twixt front and farm. Lend-Lease ferried 427,000 to Moscow's maw, outstripping the Reich's war's toll. Logistics, that drab sinew, emerged sovereign. Without wheels, panzers prowled not, guns spoke mute. Fuel's famine etched deepest scars. Reich's thirst, slaked by Fischer-Tropsch alchemy from Ruhr coal, 40 million barrels 43 a pittance, and Ploieshti's fickle vein, dictated thrusts more than Halder's maps. Caucasus lunge 42? Oil's siren, not Lebensraum's lure. Americans? Awash, 1.4 billion barrels, 2/3 global gush. Italian manifests showed Corps glutted beyond gluttony, trucks idling for morale runs, generators humming for base canteens. Waste as weapon, dumps torched in Bulge's prelude, lest Rommel's heirs sip. Petroleum's asymmetry chained strategy. Offensives faltered not on will, but Watts denied, steel, the forge's blood. Crowned the calculus, 81 million U.S. tons, 43. Reich's 30 million even gorged on Lorraine's looted blooms, a threefold lash. Allies aggregate? 150 million fivefold the foe. From ingot to incendiary, disparity dictated doom. Galen's projections, revised in February's frost, foresaw 44's deluge. Soviet mills, evacuated east of Urals, respawning at 18 million tons. Britain's Clyde, a crucible for radar and Spitfire sinew. 3 foes, each outforging solo. Combined apocalypse. Normandy's thunder, June 6, 1944, vindicated the vaulted tome. Intelligence, von Roen's poisoned gift, falsified overlord tallies fed to double agents, lulling Calais ghosts, unleashed 156,000 souls on 5 beaches, 5,000 hulls blotting the channel. Mulberry harbors, those prefabbed prodigies towed from Thames mudflats, birthed ports rivaling Dover's birth, expendable as matchsticks. Within fortnight, throughput rivaled Hamburg's peak. 12,000 tons daily through sunken caissons, enough for the Wehrmacht's wants. Photographic obliques, snatched by FW-189s dodging P-47 packs, etched the excess. Depots sprawling square miles. Fuel bladders swelling like black tumors, ammo ziggurats dwarfing Eiffel spires. Allied barrages, 1944's crescendo, devoured thousands rounds hourly, rates exhausting Reich stocks in days, sustainable as scripture. Air's hegemony sealed the sky's surrender. 8th Air Force, Britain's based, mustered more birds than Luftwaffe's remnant. A single bomb group outflew a Geschwader. Losses? Hundreds weekly to Flak's bite, supplanted ere Rex cooled. 44's American tally, 96,318, Reich's 40,000 peak a gasp before Ploiecht pyres and Schweinfurt's shards. P-51s, Merlin-throated, ranged unchallenged, escorting B-17 armadas that darkened noon. Jets? Me-262's Fang, 1,400 whelped total, harried but outnumbered tenfold. Aces ashen, fuel a phantom. Attrition's scythe reaped irreplaceables. Hartmann's heirs green, sorties starved. France's liberation accelerated the hemorrhage. Breakout from Bocage. Late July's Cobra Thunder hurled Patton's ghosts across Seine in weeks. Supply tendrils stretched gaunt. Normandy ports 400 miles rearward. Pole gulped by the Red Ball Express. That improvised artery, 6,000 wheels in convoy phalanx on one-way blacktop, hauled 12,500 tons daily at Zenith, August 44's 12,342 tons single day of Wehrmacht Western Dream. Emergency? Nay. Backup when railheads lagged, exceeding Reich's aggregate haul. German scouts, peering from hedgerow blinds, tallied the torrent. Trucks in endless azure columns. Airlifted when mud mired, thousands C-47 tons weekly. Tonnage Luftwaffe couldn't dream sans chains. Patton's halt, September's thirst at Lorraine's edge. Flickered vulnerability. Third Army parched after 600-mile sprint. Yet airdrops quenched. 72 hours, fuel flowed, advance resumed. Galen's scribes computed. 1 week's tonnage to Metz outflew a full-strength flotta monthly. 44's Luftwaffe, a shadow ration to drips. Air as truck. Profligacy's pinnacle. Reich's Ju-52s rusting in dispersal hides. By autumn's equinox, the vice tightened manifold. East Bagration's Bolshevik blizzard, 2.3 million red boots, 6,000 tanks. Studebakers from Detroit ferrying T-34s. Lend-Lease's deluge, 400,000 trucks, 12,000 AFVs, 11,000 wings. Soviet steel respired, exceeding Reich's gasp. West, Seine crossed, ports prized, Rhine beckoning. German riposts, Morton's feint, Falaise's cauldron, reaped tolls but bled essence. Panzers irreplaceable, fuel phantoms. Tactics triumphed local, Market Gardens bold, Arnhem's Pyrrhic, but campaigns crumbled to quanta. Each Sherman slagged, twin birthed in Ohio. Panther, a quarter-year's Krupp vigil. Von Roena, shadowed by Gestapo whispers, his anti-Nazi murmurings, D-Day deceptions leaked, persisted, dossier variants dispatched to Keitel's desk. Attrition's ledger, he urged in a November memo, favors the fecund. By Yuletide, 4.1 ratios, 45 sixfold. Yield ground, husband steel, diplomacy's hour dawns. Keitel, that nodding reed, forwarded. Hitler bunker-bound, raved of Ardennes' miracle, a western thrust to sunder allies, seize Antwerp's vein. Fuel from foe's folly, the plan decreed. Ghost divisions, Pieper's spears targeting Yankee dumps. Desperation's calculus. No self-sustaining blitz, but brigandage masked as bold. The Bulge's bulge, December 16's fog-shrouded lunge, scripted the farce. Surprise absolute. Eisenhower's Yanks slumbering, 19,000 felled in dawn's rout, Bastonia's 101st ringed. Initial miles yielded, panic rippled rearward. Hitler toasted tactical vindication, Göring preened of will's triumph. Yet logistics lash unspooled the skein. Kampfgruppe Piper, Spear's tip, grazed Stavelow's horde, million gallons shimmering, ere torches turned it pyre. No capture, no continuance. Panzers sputtered, flanks frozen. Weather waned, skies cleared, thunderbolts and typhoons pounced, convoys columned for carrion. Reinforcements? American divisions mauled, reformed in days, reserves rotated, gear glutted from Cherbourg's cornucopia. Bastogne held by C-47 drops, tonnage defying drifts. Relief punched through ere encirclement clenched. German ledger? 12,000 dead, 38,000 maimed, 30,000 snared, irrevocable. Last reserves vaporized. 600 panzers, fuel for a fortnight. Veterans unbred. Allies? Augmented post-purge, factories indifferent to toll. Intelligence autopsy, von Rohen's swan quill. Tactics avail in hours. Industry endures epochs. The offensive, birthed in denial, consummated the dossier's dirge. 18 months foreknowledge mocked by Ardennes mud. As January's iron etched Elba's banks, von Rohene's orbit contracted. July 20's cataclysm, Stauffenberg's briefcase Valkyrie, touched him tangential, whispers known, inaction damning. Gestapo dragged him to Plötzensee, October 12's noose his terminus. No trial's farce. Honor's heir, he met the rope with Prussian stoic, his deceits, overlords faint, a covert allied boon, unavenged. Gehlen, scenting ones, archived Ostfront scrolls in Alpine crypts, courting Yank overtures as Reich's pyre smoked. Cold War's dawn would crown him BND's architect, Soviet shadows his canvas anew. The echo? Not one reports rejection, but symphony ignored. Tunisia's tales, Anzio's arithmetic, Normandy's numeracy. Factories decreed, fields but epilogue. Leadership's lens, ideology's prism, bent light to lies, spirit o'er steel, yet steel's silence felled. Millions marched to margins math foretold, cities to ash, the Reich to rubble, truth tabulated, unheeded, arithmetic's quiet coup. In the winter of 1945, as the Rhine's waters ran red with the Wehrmacht's ebbing lifeblood, the Bendler Block stood as a hallowed reliquary, its halls echoing with the ghosts of reports unread and warnings unheeded. Colonel Reinhard Gehlen, spared the noose that claimed his colleague, navigated the Reich's final throes with the pragmatism of a man who had long since traded fealty for foresight. Von Rohen's execution, October 12, 1944, a brisk autumn dawn at Plötzensee, his neck snapped by piano wire in a chamber reeking of lime, had been the coup de grace to Fremde Heere's fragile fraternity. Gestapo shadows, those specters of paranoia, had dragged him from his desk mid-memo, his crime a whisper, knowledge of Stauffenberg's bomb, inaction the sin. Yet in his final hours, the Prussian savant had etched a codicil to his ledgers, a falsified overlord order of battle ceded to Canaris's remnants that lured divisions to Calais while Omaha bled. Unwittingly, or perhaps with the sly wink of a double's duplicity, he had gifted the Allies their lodgment. His death, swift and sans spectacle, symbolized the Reich's malady. Not the analyst's error, but the regime's allergy to truth. Gehlen, wiser in survival's calculus, began his quiet exodus, files microfilmed in midnight vigils, stashed in Tyrolean vaults against the red tide. The Eastern Front, Gehlen's eternal vigil devolved into a symphony of attrition's cruel crescendo. Bagration's summer 44 maelstrom had eviscerated Army Group Center, 28 divisions vaporized, 350,000 souls to Soviet scythes. Yet the Red Colossus respired unslaked. Lend-Lease's arterial flow, that Yankee transfusion, pumped vigor into Stalin's veins. 400,000 Studebakers ferrying divisions across Pripyat marshes, 12,000 armored chariots, Sherman's rebadged as M4A2s, bolstering T-34 phalanxes, 11,000 aircraft darkening the steppe. Soviet forges, Urals reborn from Barbarossa's blaze, outstripped the Reich's gasp, 18 million ton steel 44. Tanks at 28,000 annual, a tally Galen's agents, ragged in Swiss safe houses, tallied with grim precision. Each Katyusha salvo, each IL-2 Hodor's dive, echoed American munificence. Without Detroit's dole, Zhukov's hordes might have faltered at the Vistula. Berlin's scribes, poring over intercepts from Bletchley's blind spots, computed the hemorrhage. For every panther clawed from the snow, 3 T-34s lumbered forth, fueled by Baku's black blood and Ohio's octane. Westward, the Rhine's ramparts crumbled under Eisenhower's inexorable press. Remagen's bridge, March 7's fluke, Ludendorff's span unblown, a sergeant's whim, became the hinge of fate, Allies spilling into heartland like ink on blotter. Galen's dispatches, routed through back channels, chronicled the cascade, fuel dumps at Remagen rivaling Reich's reserves, ammo trains from Antwerp's automated maw, Mulberry's heirs, those prefabbed behemoths hauling 20,000 tons daily by April's thaw. American divisions, those modular legions, rotated sans seam, a regiment mauled at Hurtgen's green hell, reconstituted in England or T, airlifted back ere scars healed. Luftwaffe remnants, Goering's phantoms, sortied in dribbles, 200 sorties daily against 10,000 Allied thunders, aces ashen, fuel rationed to reconnaissance sips. P-51 swarms, those long-legged Mustangs, ranged unmolested, strafing FW-190s mid-climb. Losses? 100 weekly supplanted by Willow Run's wheeze. Jets flickered promise. Arado jets, He-162 Volksjägers, but 1,400 Me-262s total, engines finicky as thoroughbreds, couldn't stem the flood. Qualities quill against quantities coin, a Schwalbe might fell 5 lightnings. But 50 pursued, Galen's final tallies, committed to ciphered pads as Berlin bunkered, projected the end's geometry. April 45, 5-1 armor across fronts, 6.1 wings, trucks, American convoys, Red Ball's echoes, outhauled rail nets crippled by sabotage. Soviet spearheads, Berlin bound, motored on Lend-Lease largesse, trucks outnumbering Wehrmacht's horse lines tenfold. Petroleum's phantom haunted every thrust. Reich's synthetic plants, Schweinfurt shattered, yielded drips. Ploiești pylons, B-24 Pyres. Americans? Forward depots brimmed, C-47s dropping barrels on jump fields. Waste stratagem, jeeps joy-ridden to morale's mend. Generators for PX lights. Profligacy Galen likened to Midas's curse. Transmuting caution to gold. Bulge's embers had previewed the pyre. Initial routes hailed as Hannibal's echo, yet logistics lash unbound the bow. Bastonia's siege, air sustained by 1,000 tons weekly, tonnage exceeding Luftwaffe's monthly lift, had mocked Hitler's Will's winter. Piper's panzers, parched at Stavelow's pyre, sputtered to surrender. Reserves raised. The West's last gamble gambled to ghosts. As cherry blossoms mocked the Elbe in May, Galen orchestrated his pivot. Alpine caches unsealed, dossiers tendered to 7th Army scouts, Soviet dispositions, agent nets in Warsaw's webs, a Cold War dowry for doughboy favor. Alan Dulles, OSS puppeteer in Bern, clasped the bargain. Galen's mind for amnesty, his Fremde Heer East reborn as CIA's Eastern Eyes. By Nuremberg's gavel, he helmed the Galen Org, precursor to Bond's BND, Soviet shadows his canvas anew, American patrons his unwitting heirs. The irony? The analyst who tabulated Yankee thunder now parsed red monsoons. Arithmetic's ally in perpetual vigilance. The Reich's requiem, May 7's Reims capitulation, Jodel's scrawl on Dunitz's behest, crowned 18 months' foretold farce. From November 43's Bendler Block Epiphany to VE Day's Veil. The war ground on in denial's delirium. Stalingrad's kin at Königsberg, Berlin's barricades a Brobdingnagian Stalingrad. Millions felled, 1.2 million German dead post-dossier, Soviet tolls tripled, Allied crimson a lesser stain, cities to cinders, Dresden's firestorm, a RAF requital for Coventry's kin, Jewish ash, 6 million shroud, the Holocaust's machinery idled only when fronts converged, ideology's inferno fed by factories unbombed. Europe's corpse, from Ardennes to Auschwitz, the harvest of hubris. Leadership's lens, warped by Mein Kampf's prism, bent data to dogma. Spirit über Stahl, yet Steele's silence sealed the sepulchre. The tragedy transcended tactic's tomb. It indicted intelligence's impotence absent ear. Von Rohen and Galen, those Prussian parsons of proof, had tabulated the terminus. Tunisia's tales of tossed tins, Anzio's arithmetic of abundance, Normandy's numeracy of mulberries. Each shard, Liberty launches outpacing U-boat obits sevenfold, Sherman sextuples to Panther pangs, verified via vectors manifold, POW palavers, agent avowals, serial sacrament. Projections penned in precision, 44's 3-1 to 45's fivefold, attrition's axiom unyielding. Yield territories, sue for stasis, diplomacy's door ajar while territory tallied. Instead, offensives orgiastic, Ardennes' autumn, Budapest's bleed, Oder's odyssey, irreplaceables immolated on altars of illusion. On altars of illusion. Hitler's helix, that venomous vine, strangled sense, Wunderwaffen's whisper, V2's vanity, 3,000 hurled for hubris, scant strategic sting, overrode reality's roar. Goering's Luftwaffe, once eagle's eye, dwindled to moth. Speer, armament's alchemist, confessed in cell, May 44's synthetic pyre at Luna, the war's economic knell. Even he, slave-lash architect, peaked production 44, 39,000 planes, 18,000 panzers, yet acknowledged the asymptote. Allies' avalanche. 300,000 aircraft wars span, inexorable. Rommel, Riviera-bound, Air July's bolt, had divined at Alamein. Endless materiel Mach's maneuver. Guderian panzer prophet poured POW Shermans, concluding unwinnable arithmetic. Their voices, variant echoes, vaulted to void. The captured manifests, those mundane missives, Fifth Army's fiscal flesh, embodied the indictment. No enigma's enigma, no Manhattan's mushroom. Banal bureaucracy, columns of casings and crankcases, unveiling verity. One corps cornucopia eclipsing Eastern armies. Apportionment's apocalypse, 15,000 tons shells monthly, sevenfold the Reich's ration, 3.2 million gallons glutting idols. Replacements routine, 847 trucks, 43 tanks, surpassing national nativity. From such seeds, the sowers sum. America, 41% global forge, birthing behemoths from depression's dormancy, idle idols to industrial inferno, reconversion sans reinvention, Germany's foil? Full throttle 33, no reserves reprieve, conquest's crutch, slave's scourge, spear's spasm. Capacity capped, expansion ensnared, Ruhr raids, resource rifts. Decentralized Yankee hives, Chrysler's chain, Ford's flow, resilient to rubble. Reich's crucibles, clustered confluences, cratered by Consolidated's caress. Steel sacrament, 81 million to 30, Allies 150, a quintuple quelling. Truck's testament, 620,000 to 100,000. Horses hauler to obsolescence, Red Ball's relay, a Reich reverie. Petroleum's plaint, 1.4 billion barrels to 40 million. Abundance's antidote to ration's rigor. The moral, minted in May's mire, endures epochs beyond Elba, industrial wars. Factories' fiefdoms won in welder's watch, not warrior's waltz. Courage cantilevers not against cascades. Tactics teeter on tenfold tides. Accurate augury, Gellen's grids, von Rohena's vectors, avails absent acceptance. Leadership's liability, ideology's idol, supplanting evidence's edict. Nazi nodder, yes, but caveat universal. Ukraine's quag. Drone deluges, missile monsoons, echoes of El Alamein, where quanta quelled quality. 8 decades on, October 12, 2025, von Rohen's Noosday Redux, the ledgers linger luminous. Bendler Block, now Democracy's Domain, memorials the martyrs. Stauffenberg Square, Analyst's Alcove. Yet the cipher endures, arithmetic author's apotheosis. Factory's fiat or field's fray, the captured charts, those clerical clarions, chronicled not conquest's cusp, but capitulation's code. Numbers narrative, unarguable, unaverted. Germany, apprised 43, dallied to dust 45. Denial's dividend, devastation's due. In modern melees, heed the hammer's hum, production's pulse prevails. Will's whisper yields to Weld's wail, spirit's spark, to steel's surge. The analysts, truth's tellers, tabulated triumph's thief, industry's inexorable inheritance. And in that inheritance, the war's wan wisdom. Arithmetic always, inexorably, wins. Wins.